understand how it works, learn from the people who got better themselves. It's just so great that there are people out there doing the work and helping people get better. Stay away from negative messaging. There are people who are angry and wreaking havoc out there who write crazy things and videos, and it's good for you to follow clear, constructive advice from people who learned the hard way, and just keep on going, get your practices, get your Sherpas around you, the people who can really help you switch off and settle. And there's a way through this. There really is.
Hey, Tinnitus community. This is Dr. Ben Thompson with Treble Health. I'm joined today by Julian Cowan-Hill. And in my opinion, we're some of the leading voices in the tinnitus space. And we wanted to bring you guys into our catch-up conversation to discuss what's the best mindset to have for tinnitus treatment and tinnitus relief. What strategies should you put in place? What are the things that we do recommend you do? What are some things we recommend you not do? We'll talk about what we're seeing in the field, and we may even have some healthy disagreements at times because we know that there's different ways to approach tinnitus. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Dr. Ben, and I'm a doctor of audiology, licensed in California. I completed a residency at UCSF Medical Center in San Francisco, and then started a YouTube channel focusing on tinnitus. My focus for tinnitus has been going on for about 8 years now. And from there, I started offering telehealth services to patients. Well, fast forward years later, and we've seen thousands of patients over telehealth for tinnitus treatment, mostly in the United States. We have a team of 8 audiologist doctors on our team focusing on tinnitus, and our YouTube channel has garnered 20 million views. Some of that was sound therapy tracks, but also just with information and education. So really glad to be here with you today, and I'm joined by my friend in England, Julian Cowan-Hill, who will now introduce some of his background.
Good to see you again, Ben. I've been working with tinnitus since 1999, so I'm a psychotherapist. I'm based in London. I've got 25 years of experience now working with tinnitus people as a psychotherapist and also as a cranial sacral therapist. So that's a hands-on form of healing. I've written a couple of books on tinnitus, A Long Tide to Silence, which is my own personal journey, how I went from hell back to silence over quite a long period of my life. And I've also written a self-help book, Tinnitus. It's called Tinnitus from Tyrant to Friend, How to Let Go of the Ringing in Your Ears. So I have a practice in London, and I've been working full-time with people with tinnitus since 1999 when I was a student, and I've had a full practice ever since. And I actually, when I started learning about how to get better, I had dreadful tinnitus myself for about 20 years. And since 2002, I've had no tinnitus. I've made a really complete recovery. And I learned a lot about getting better. And every time the penny dropped and I learned something important, I decided to put it on YouTube. And I thought it would be great to share whatever I learned with the community. And I've got over 200 videos now. And just this week, I had 3 people saying, you won't know me, but you saved my life like 2 or 3 years ago when I discovered your YouTube channel in the middle of the night in a state of terror and anxiety. And I started watching your information and it all started making sense to me. And thank God I'm now in a much better place. And, people often organize a session just to tell me where they've got to. So, it's a really rewarding field to work in, and it's very, very satisfying helping people get their lives back. And, I'm in the territory of psychology, healing, and cranial work, and you're in audiology. We have very, very different approaches, but I'm forever referring people across. And it's really nice just to cross-pollinate from different approaches sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into what we're each seeing in our respective fields. Along the lines of what you shared there is that having the right information and education on what is actually happening in our ears and in our system, paired with specific tools or strategies on how to reduce tinnitus over time. I mean, that is what I want everyone who's struggling with tinnitus to have. So let's jump into that. I would say for me, what I'm seeing is the earlier someone can start having a care plan in place, the better. So there's very simple ways to do this. The two pillars of this that I recommend to people who reach out to me would be some basic sound therapy and then trying to enter tinnitus through the mental emotional pathway. And people ask, well, how do I turn down the tinnitus? How do I erase it or get rid of it? I want it gone. And just over time, what I see is that with consistent sound therapy, as well as some tools on the mental and emotional switch, that tinnitus does get better over time, and it can significantly get better. So what are your thoughts on some basic tips from what you're seeing with your clients these days, Julian?
Well, I agree with you. I think a really important part of this is understanding what tinnitus is and how it works, because a lot of people go online, they read really nasty or difficult stuff online or very negative stuff, and that can really help them feel trapped and like there's no way out, and then they start panicking. I think having a good understanding of what this condition is, what makes it better, what makes it worse, can really help people's anxiety and fear come down. So I think providing information, helping people understand that this is a very changeable condition, and how we feel inside, how the fight or flight or freeze response have a massive impact on how our ears function. And the more grounded, safe, stable, calm, settled we are inside, the more the hypervigilant hearing can downregulate. So psychologically, understanding what's going on is a massive leap forward for people. And providing information like we do, sharing it and putting it out there I think it really benefits people, and they can start to put the puzzle together and start to work out a care plan. And there are various tools that can be incredibly helpful. But I do think understanding psychologically is one of the fundamental things that will help people get better. And then they can reach out into audiological treatments and devices that can help bring the tinnitus down with various maskers over a period of time. That can be incredibly helpful. And that's something you specialize in. And in my practice, I teach people a lot of focusing practices. I get them to do a lot of self-soothing to get the irritability of the face, jaw, and neck area down, to learn how to really ground and center themselves, and to get hands-on help to release the buzzy charge that they have in their system, to bring the adrenal response down. A lot of people come to me and they're like rabbits in the headlights. So literally in the freeze response, the whole upper body, neck, face, jaw is completely frozen, and they've gone into that catastrophic thinking with hypersensitive sensors. And so to free the body up and to get them to learn to self-soothe and to do practices to calm the body down can be a massive tool in the toolbox and a very good path to making a good recovery.
Definitely agree. And when I'm having consultations with patients, trying to help them, I am often using that reference of there's two main approaches that most of the scientific community seem to agree on, and most doctors and health specialists seems to agree on, which is there's a sound treatment component and a psychology treatment component, or even more simply, sound therapy and ways to change the thoughts and behaviors. Now, people are very eager to say, oh, well, I need something like the device, whether it be a sound device, whether it be bimodal stimulation, whether it be a hearing aid. Physical devices, I think, are easy for the mind to say, that's going to solve my problem. I need that. But what the research and my own experience shows is this other pillar is equally as important, which is that mental emotional angle. And that's harder for people to say, I need that. It's harder for people to even understand what that is. So how do you convince someone that a non-device solution can actually lower the sound?
Yeah, because the problem with an approach that I work with is it involves work. People have to work on themselves. They have to do practices. They have to get therapies, and that can be taxing for people. So a lot of my practices, I'm forever checking in with people and saying, "How was your tinnitus this week?" I like numbers. It was a 6 out of 10 for 3 days, and it went down to a 4 out of 10 or whatever. I always track people's progress. And people often don't do the work. They don't do the self-soothing or the yoga or the breathing practices. And part of my job is to really motivate them. So, they know my own story, that I've made a really good recovery, and there are lots of positive case histories on my app, quite an app. And that can motivate people into doing practices. But, to shift the focus away from hearing and get the whole nervous system to shift out of fight or flight into well-being, it takes work. So I'm forever persuading people to do practices and
Yeah,
nudging them.
encouraging them, motivating them, educating them,
Yeah.
reminding them, all of it, right?
Yes. And another really big part of it is staying away from negative messages, because we all know that when we're going through tinnitus and we're terrified and we're really fearful and reactive, the tiniest negative message can come in and really rock people and make them feel really upset or afraid. And so providing clear information and very clear constructive advice and giving them a guideline to do half an hour practice in the morning. And then in the evening, I ask people to massage the face and do yawning practices. And it sounds so silly, yawning. It's such a simple thing, but yawning for a good 10 minutes every evening and massaging and releasing tension can become a very powerful ritual, which can release a lot, and people can start to find their symptoms changing and starting to come down and become less intense. So there's some very specific protocols and practices that people can get into, and they need to kind of just stay with it for a while. And as soon as they start experiencing symptoms getting better, then of course they're much more motivated to keep going.
I wanted to bring up something called the negativity bias. And as we were talking, it made me think of this idea that, most experts agree that the brain sort of responds to negative information 5 times more intense than neutral or positive information, and that comes from our evolution. The worry, essentially the anxiety, keeps us alive because we're alert to potential threats, dangers, things that could harm us or even kill us. And to some degree, the brain is responding to tinnitus in that same fundamental way. But perhaps in the tinnitus journey, that negativity bias is even stronger because some piece of negative information can kind of set someone back or create so much doubt that the process they're on will work or the tools they're using are legitimate. And, unfortunately, people come to us, right? Email, phone call, Zoom meeting, and I mean, they're crying, they're broken, they're heard from someone that there was nothing that they could do for tinnitus, or maybe someone questioned the legitimacy that working with me would actually help them, and it breaks my heart. I mean, I empathize with what that person is going through. Is that unfortunately there are people in the tinnitus industry or field or companies that are preying on people's desperation. So I understand where it comes from and I empathize with it. But really, when someone is told wrong information and persuaded to not do something that's helping them or has a strong likelihood to help them, that's upsetting. And unfortunately, that's some of the less glamorous work that we do, right?
Sure. And so guiding people away from negative information, and, sometimes there's some naysayers or people who are rude or disrespectful, and they post nasty things online or say, oh, so-and-so is a scammer, or don't give him his money or whatever. People, when they're in that horribly vulnerable state, they can come across negative information and it can really cause a lot of harm and damage. Unfortunately, there are certain videos out there and certain talk forums or threads which are sort of actually libelous or spreading, like committing defamation. They can say really negative things about the tinnitus providers who are out there doing a good service helping people. So, it's quite extraordinary, some of the negativity that is out there. So we have to keep people on track and stay with them and motivate them. And when people are in a dark place and they're really terrified, as a therapist, I work with clients very, very closely, and sometimes I will leave the theatre to answer a phone call if I'm worried that somebody's in a really vulnerable place, or answer the phone on holiday, or go the extra mile until they are sort of back into a much more calm, safe, relaxed place. So sometimes it can be really challenging, the work, but having lots of experience, I know it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I've helped thousands of people over the last 25 years, and, do get good results. And, I do get people coming back 10, 15 years later saying, "Oh, I've got backache. Can you get rid of that?" And I said, "Well, how's your tinnitus?" And so, that went in 2006. You helped me years ago. Having lots of experience and knowing how to guide people, keeping them on track and keeping them working is a really important part of helping people. So you'll be doing it with your audiological devices and providing information. I'll be encouraging people to do their practices and to have the body work, and I'll be challenging the mindset. Some people's mindsets can be a bit negative, and I think as long as we keep them on track and keep providing support, then we can get really fantastic results. So there's nothing better than somebody saying, "You saved my life. I've got my life back. Thank God." It really does work. I'm so grateful, and that leaves you feeling really warm in your heart, and you can go to sleep at night thinking, yeah, that I'm really glad I helped that person.
Yeah, I'm doing something that matters, and this is what we're called to do. I mean, at some point, I realized, that my initial motivations for choosing a line of work or a field were perhaps, intrinsically motivated and about me and my future, but then realized, wow, we're actually in a position to help a lot of people who are going to doctors and told there's not much you can do, you just have to live with it. They go online and they see, well, there's no cure for tinnitus. Sorry. What's missing is this massive space of, can you take tinnitus from a 6 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10 over a 3 to 6 months period? I mean, you and I have a certain amount of confidence with this, that when we talk to other people, they have this question of, really? Because for them, all they've heard is the opposite. But for us, it's what we see. I'll speak personally. It's what we see in our line of work. 85% of our patients, we measure their tinnitus functional index score when they start, 3 months after, 6 months after. By 6 months, 85% have a clinically significant reduction, where the patient agrees and they say, yeah, it's better. Whereas the previous position that many people hold is, there's nothing I can do. So I'm definitely in agreement with this, along the lines of how to maintain positivity, how to stay top of mind of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Here's the consistent practices I can do. Some things that we've implemented on our team that are beneficial is, we have individual sessions with our tinnitus doctors, our audiologists, and we're generally meeting about every 2 weeks. At the beginning, that's adjusting the sound therapy devices or the hearing aids, but then over time, that part of it is set up, and then the appointments turn into some sessions related to fundamentals of cognitive behavioral techniques, fundamentals of mindfulness. So we know the mental emotional pathway is extremely important. Changing false beliefs, changing automatic negative thinking, replacing that with accurate thought, catching ourselves when we're going in these anxiety stuck spirals and having things to do, super important. Learning guided breathing or a relaxation practice like meditation or other forms similar. I know you have a lot to say about that, which we can talk about. Being consistent with that for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then maybe longer, depending on how how someone's tinnitus is responding. We also have a group coaching session where twice per month we meet. Anyone who's working on our team meets with a group of our doctors, and we're reinforcing the same things. So, Julian, what I've reflected on recently is this can be pretty simple, but it's not easy, because just because something's simple doesn't mean it's easy to actually go through and
Sure.
get the results.
And I wish, we both get good results, and I wish our approach was more widely known by, general practitioners. And, if only like the National Health Service in Britain, or, the mainstream way of helping people could just refer to people in the field who are helping. Because I'm still amazed, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Ben, is that I'm amazed how much negative information comes from like ear, nose and throat specialists. They said there's nothing you can do about it. And many doctors still put out this negative information, which is really unhelpful. And why am they not being educated about all the things that definitely do help? Thank God for YouTube. Thank God for grassroots places. The internet, it has enabled us to share our information, and that can ripple out into the tinnitus community, and everybody can learn and benefit, from people.
Let's talk about that for a moment. Did you start working with tinnitus patients in a pre-internet popularity era?
Yes, so 1999. It was only just starting. I can't remember when it all took off, but it was kind of pre-internet, so it's much more sort of word of mouth and much more local. And as YouTube started taking off, I don't know what motivated, but sharing the stuff, I thought, right, I've learned something really important. I think other people need to know this, and just putting it out there. I got to be in my bonnet, because I was angry one day. I said, stop telling people there's no cure. People can get better. And I put that video out, and it just created a lot
Classic video for anyone who hasn't watched it. Go check it out. It's Julian on some, very old school webcam, pixelated. You have to almost squint to recognize him.
And my beard was tiny, and it was still dark. I had a bit of a rant, but that actually generated interest, and I thought, well, why not keep on going? And I'm so glad I did, because, it has created a shared information. I just wish the mainstream could stop saying negative information and just put out fairly clear, constructive advice on how to get better.
I talked to some ENT doctors. I mean, ENT doctors in the United States, otolaryngologists, I have conversations with them, and believe me, I'm trying it. They're generally receptive. I think from their side of things, what they do is surgery and medications. That's what the medical system really does, especially physicians. So there is no surgery or medication for 99.5% of tinnitus cases, right? So we get it, we empathize, but it's not hard to say, there's nothing you can do with me. Here's some things you can do to get better. That's really the missing link. It's not that complex for them to understand. They're all smart women and men. So we really just need to educate them. And my brother and I went to a national ENT conference in the United States. And we were having these conversations with a lot of them, and we had our sign that said, tinnitus patients, we can help. And they would stop and they would go, okay, tell me what this is about. After 60 seconds of explaining, well, we use sound therapy. We have the one-on-one counseling piece of it with the emotional part of tinnitus. And patients don't cure it most times, but they do get significantly better. And they say, okay, send me some brochures, and I might recommend this to some patients. So overall, the response is positive. I think it's just an education and boots on the ground problem of how are we going to tell all of them.
I've been very lucky, because I do a tinnitus healing retreat in Italy twice a year, and I've teamed up with Dr. Michael Gollenhoff, and he's this brilliant German therapist. He knows so much about tinnitus, and he's an ENT and an audiologist. And it's just really nice working with him and having that sort of medical clout and understanding. And on the first retreat we did together, I teach people to do what I call the boat mast meditation, which is a way of focusing along the spine and anchoring and really learning to center yourself. So instead of this, you're focusing on your midline. And if you do it regularly, it can actually bring the adrenaline levels down in your nervous system, which turns off the hypervigilant sensors. So, the sensors can actually down-regulate. That's really significant. And he was just blown away by this practice, just a simple boat mask meditation practice. And he now teaches his clients to do it. And we've made it like one of the mainstays of the retreat. And once you've got a really strong tool in your toolbox that can help you settle, and you can practice it and just get into it on a regular basis, it starts to become like a ritual, and it gets stronger and stronger. And the brain, instead of going and fetching tinnitus, what we think about comes about. The brain will naturally start fetching something else, and people become more centered, more grounded, and that takes root more and more, and that provides a real alternative to catastrophic thinking this is something people can learn and cultivate and get better and better at. So I'm forever teaching these kinds of practices and encouraging people to take up yoga and Tai Chi and to learn to self-soothe. A lot of tinnitus people can't self-soothe. That's a very big sweeping statement. But, if we go into that panic and terrified by our own symptoms and, oh my God, I feel trapped, there's no way out. I know what that's like. We need to be able to do whatever it is for half an hour, practice on breathing practices, yoga, whatever, so that our system settles and the mind stops racing and the senses start to down-regulate and normalize. So, there's a huge amount that we can do to help.
I'm a believer in the holistic options, certainly. On my personal journey, I read the book Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn, and that is this in-depth work on mindfulness and how it can help chronic health conditions like pain, and that has since been used, or the fundamentals have been applied to tinnitus with good results. And I just think most people haven't really been introduced to this kind of mindful or holistic path. But I wanted to ask you, let's say that a 60-year-old man develops pretty sudden tinnitus. How many days, weeks, or months after should they start the more holistic complementary approach? Because most people's first thought is, I need to go to a doctor. I need to get this checked out. There's something wrong with my ear. I need to get it fixed. If they eventually go to the ENT, they might not get a solution, and then they go, I need to try some supplements. I need to, maybe do a hearing aid. But it's sort of like that holistic or that mind-body approach is almost like the last resort. But what would you recommend at what point in the journey?
It is, unfortunately, what often happens is people have a major freak out and they stop sleeping and they have a crisis and, they go through hell, and in the depths of despair they may search online and come across some useful information. So the people I see have normally gone through that route, and they've had a horrendous month, can't sleep, the tinnitus has gone through the roof, and then they start finding the information. I mean, I think as soon as possible they need to be explain to them just how our hearing is very changeable. It's not a fixed deal. Our hearing can flare up and become very oversensitized, and it can really switch off, and the filters of the brain can ignore sound. Hearing can go into screensaver mode and ignore the heartbeat and the brain buzz and all the stuff inside. That is a crucial piece of information. I just wish all the doctors and ENTs would say, look, hearing's changeable. It's very different when you're afraid to when you're very calm and focused. That one piece of information suddenly gives people a sense of hope. Oh gosh, maybe there is a way out of this. This should be in all the tinnitus information. It's immediately comforting, and it makes people realize that maybe there is something they can do about it. The hands-on work, the body work,
things like massage, or you do some craniosacral work, right?
Craniosacral therapy, acupuncture, reflexology. These things have a direct
yoga therapy,
like impact. I mean, you can literally go into a cranial session or an acupuncture session with an 8 out of 10, and you can come out 50 minutes later, 3 out of 10. This literally happens. This happens all the time. Sometimes people go sideways a bit. There can be other stuff going on. But, it's so comforting to know you can go and see somebody, and an hour later you come up feeling calm, clear, relaxed, and often the tinnitus becomes less intense, or it can change or settle.
So what does that show us? What does that show us, really?
Good therapy, when a therapist brings the central nervous system into a state of calm, so when you bring in a sense of safety and the adrenaline comes down and all the flightiness settles, the mind stops racing, the body relaxes, the stomach starts gurgling, the senses desensitize. It shows people that it is very changeable. It gives people a tremendous sense of hope and motivation, and that's what makes people come back. And they can feel their symptoms coming down from week to week. And then they start to understand the physiology of this, that it is a very changeable condition. So body work can really have a massive impact on the nervous system and the ears. I know it's hard to believe, but when you do thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of body work, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years. When you tune in, you can feel the pulsing and the vibrations and the qualities of a person, and learning how to stay with that and get that to settle is a skill that body workers have. And the person on the couch and the therapist can feel this coming down. So, that's very, very comforting for people. They come to me, I know what they're going through because I've been through myself, and the cranial work can help them settle, and that gives them a sense of real solid pathways forward. Just like with you can regulate their ears, you can monitor them, and you can slowly start bringing the sound enrichment down, and that can help the tinnitus come down. They're very, very specific things that you as an audiologist can do, and me as a psychologist and as a body-based practitioner, things that I can do. A nutritionist can be useful too. There are lots of different things that can help. The crucial thing is when people start finding their symptoms are improving, and it's like, oh gosh, this really is changeable.
And I think the fundamental benefit or the fundamental physiology that is changing is that the central nervous system is settling, and that part of our brain that is designed to keep us alert and locked into potential threat or danger is being conditioned that there's actually no threat or danger here.
Yeah.
So the sound treatment helps with that, certainly calming the body and actually showing the body and the brain with proof of, hey, if you're freaking out to this sound because you think it's a threat, my body's actually very relaxed and at ease. So there's some disconnect, and the brain is smart, and it says, oh, then this tinnitus probably isn't that big of an issue. Let me strengthen the filter of this sound. So it was an 8 and now it's a 5. These are the kinds of things we're working on. I wanted to ask, do you use the framework of explaining reducing tinnitus and that filter mechanism in the emotional brain? Do you explain that as habituation, or do you use other language that is essentially aiming at the same thing?
Yeah, what I tend to do is I say, if you do nothing, the worst case scenario is eventually you're just going to get incredibly bored of this, and your mind will start to move on to other things, and you're very likely to go through habituation, which is actually a massive improvement. So I always say people habituate, it's incredibly positive. You stop fighting it, your mind can focus on to other things, you kind of get bored of it. And that volatility of the tinnitus, when people habituate, tends to really smooth out. So I use habituation. People get terrified and think, I don't want to habituate. I want this gone. I don't want to have to live with this for the rest of my life. I say, no, when you habituate, you don't think about it anymore. It's no longer an issue. It's a massive improvement. So this is most likely coming your way sooner or later. And that people kind of find that more digestible. But then I say, I explain certain practices and approaches. If you can really settle, like people do when they're having cranial work, I say to people, when you came in today, you were really worried about my practice being quiet, didn't know whether you would be able to cope with the noise in your head. And by the end of the session, you were practically asleep and you left in a really calm state and you just didn't care and you just felt very settled and much easier in your body. More and more of that will bring the whole thing down. So I'm quite sort of down to earth about saying the sound can come down. Your fear of the sound can fall away completely. That's often the first thing to go. That, all of us lot, you, me, all the people out there helping tinnitus people, within a couple of weeks, the anxiety and fear can come down a lot, and that's going to help massively. And then talking about the sound quietening down, the mind no longer getting fixated on the tinnitus. So instead of being like a dog with a bone, we can literally start forgetting about it and focusing on other things. And tinnitus, instead of being center stage, it kind of moves out more space and people can genuinely stop thinking about it.
And quite often the sound volume gets softer over time. That is one of the most misunderstood parts of tinnitus treatment, is that people think that habituation always means that it's the same level of sound, it's the same experience. Quite the opposite in most cases. Generally speaking, with tinnitus treatment, the sound volume can change and reduce and improve. And that actually is habituation. I think this is one of the hardest things to explain to patients, which is habituation is essentially what explains most of getting better with tinnitus. It's not just, oh, I train myself to not care about it, but it's the exact same experience. That would be really bad. And I don't know if you and I would really still be engaged in the work that we do if really that's the outcome we could get for our patients. It's different. I hear it's significantly less of my day, and often the volume perception is less.
One of the problems for me, it's an ironic problem, is that I got to zero. So I heard nothing after 20 years of really bad, really loud tinnitus. So coming down to zero is a real thing for me. And when I'm working with people, eventually we can get down to zeros, ones and twos, or 0.5 for us is very specific. Zero is very specific. Zero is nothing in a quiet room.
Quite rare, very rare. Most people shouldn't put that as their goal. Can we agree on that?
My problem is that I've got there. And so I can't pretend that it's not possible. And I've worked with quite a lot of people who have got there. Quite a lot of people, if they get down to ones and twos, that's good enough. But there are plenty of people that I work with who are sticklers for perfection and meticulous, and they really want to kind of get to zero. And it can be a long haul sometimes, but it happens. I get people saying, Julian, at last, I was having a picnic by a lake in Austria with my family, and I heard silence. At last,
yeah,
I finally believe you.
It's beautiful.
I think, well, fantastic. Trying to get to silence, one of the problems is trying to get it, grasping for it, can actually keep you focused on your ears.
That makes sense.
And that can kind of push your tinnitus into the awareness. So a lot of getting better is not thinking about it, no longer focusing on it.
Yeah.
And, this is where, our different branches that have different effects. With cranial work, sometimes you can drop people into an incredibly still state where the chit-chat stops and everything just drops into stillness. And that's
very parasympathetic response there.
Massively. And that's possible. So I know it's contentious for some people who are struggling. And the journey changes a lot, and the way I help people changes tremendously as they get towards the end. And when people are really struggling at the beginning, when they're going through hell in the crisis phase, it's not helpful to talk about that at all. It's like really solid, audiological devices, solid practices, regular hands-on work, and a lot of our work is to keep people going and keep people focused, keep them on track.
Definitely. Well, I certainly acknowledge that, some cases of yours and other cases have completely gotten to silence, and they're definitely out there. My mentor, Dr. Jastreboff, tended to recommend to his students, don't aim for golden silence, because it can lead people feeling like they didn't get fully better, when in reality going from an 8 out of 10 to a 2 out of 10 is life-changing, and millions of people have a mild amount of tinnitus living full and productive lives. So I tend to say, hey, let's do that. If we can get that, that's a win. Anything more than that, bring it on. Yes, please. But that's definitely a win.
That's an amazing win. And other, some people who want to take it deeper and further, they can. And, it really depends on the person and how far they want to go.
It is also worth adding that each individual case with tinnitus really is so unique. So if you're listening, don't try to compare yourself to Julian's story. You don't know his full story. Don't compare yourself to someone else you meet. Don't even compare yourself to too many other people, because the individual outcomes here do vary. So, work with someone like Julian or myself, and we can create realistic expectations for you and really help you. Julian, let's land the plane here. Any final words?
Yeah. I think understand how it works, learn from the people who got better themselves. It's just so great that there are people out there doing the work and helping people get better. Stay away from negative messaging. There are people who are angry and wreaking havoc out there, who write crazy things and videos, and it's good for you to follow clear, constructive advice from people who learned the hard way, and just keep on going, get your practices, get your Sherpas around you, the people who can really help you switch off and settle. And there's a way through this. There really is.
Absolutely. And guys, you can handle this. That's my message. If you ever feel like you're overwhelmed, you're stuck, just remind yourself, take a deep breath, calm yourself, and remind yourself, I can handle this.
A quick plug here. On my Quieten app, there are loads of techniques and practices. And we have question and answer sessions every couple of weeks. All the practices and techniques on the app I have collected together over 25 years of working with tinnitus people. All the things that have helped them I've put into the app. And so if you're feeling like you're going sideways, or you're full of despair, or you feel stuck, do look at the techniques and try some new ones and different ones. You may be really pleasantly surprised how helpful they can be.
Thank you. All right, guys, this is Julian Cowan-Hill. You can find him online. He has practice. He can meet with you. And thanks for watching this conversation, and let us know in the comments what you thought. Julian, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Ben, for putting it out there.
You're welcome.